Collaboration is key, and collaborative business models are the key component to keep the business going. Let us invite Dag Atle Nesheim, research scientist, energy and transport in SINTEF Ocean, to share with us the need for collaborative business models in autonomous vessel ecosystems.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dag Atle Nesheim. I come from SINTEF Ocean, and today I'll be presenting our paper, The Need for Collaborative Business Models in Autonomous Vessel Ecosystems. Our work stems from the Horizon 2020 project ICMASS, Advanced, Efficient and Green Intermodal Systems. We started back in June 2020 and will be finalizing this project in May next year. Please visit our webpage for further information. Our paper in short. Well, large-scale uptake of autonomous ship systems require heavy investments. There's a dire need for investment decision support, and there are high risks involved. There's a need to see the ship and port as an ecosystem. So let's have a look at the overall picture of a terminal operator or port in terms of considering new investments. Basically, you have two main blocks. You have the expected costs and you have the expected income. Based on that, you should be able to make a cost-benefit assessment of said investment. Starting with the costs, we know that we are looking at CAPEX, OPEX, and maintenance costs. And related to these costs are a set of associated commercial risks. First of all, there is this need for a certain quality in the port and terminal operations to be provided that will affect the costs. The maintenance strategies for the infrastructure will obviously affect the total cost or the expected costs, meaning that there's a need for a commitment from the customers and service providers in terms of how you're able to set up your maintenance strategies for the potential terminal infrastructure. And there's a need to have a customer service level requirements adapted to maintenance strategies as well. We know that the business models or the pricing towards the service providers is vital, and we need to make sure that we have the right price for the right performance. And by price here, I mean the price provided by the service providers or the infrastructure providers towards the terminal or the port. Regarding the expected income, roughly speaking, these are related to the number of port calls and the expected cargo volume. So how do you decide, or how do you identify the most likely cargo volume or number of port calls? Well, what we did was to undertake an extensive cargo flow analysis where we looked at the potential cargo flow, the percentage of cargo flow that could pass through the port, and the physical cargo flow design. There's also a need here to have a commitment or adaptable business models and strategies from your customers. And again, what we need to define is the right price for the right performance. Looking at this picture, what you see is that both the costs and the expected incomes are highly dependent on the other stakeholders surrounding the port, customers, service providers, etc., etc. And what you want to achieve is a notion of, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But simple promises isn't enough. What's needed is a mutually binding formalization of rights, responsibilities, and underlying framework conditions. What am I able to commit to and still make money? How can I act in my best interests while contributing to the greater good? And how do we deal with the common risks? And indeed, what's the greater good? Currently, what you see concerning or surrounding an autonomous vessel ecosystem is that there is a large number of different stakeholders. You have the port operators, you have the ship owner, terminal operators, technology providers, freight forwarders, charterers, and cargo owners. These are only the commercial stakeholders as well. And each of these stakeholders have a dream of buying low and selling high. Result is a series of suboptimal business processes not contributing to the greater good, being a system where the cargo comes in and the cargo comes out of a transport chain, a supply chain, or a value chain, and where all the different sub-processes are sort of invisible to the overall customer concerning the cargo in and the cargo out. So, how do we ensure that each of these different stakeholders are happy with the commitments they have to make and the output or the results that they gain, ensuring at the same time the autonomous vessel ecosystem? Well, in our paper, we suggest 4 different business models. These are not necessarily 100% novelties, but they give an indication on which direction further research within the autonomous vessel ecosystem should take. Firstly, you have the long-term contracts. What you need is to cover all the different return on investments timelines for the different stakeholders involved in this long-term contract, ensuring that each stakeholder is able to see his cost-benefit assessment or his return on investment covered within the contract needed. The second business model we suggest is co-ownership of terminal equipment. Basically, seeing equipment as a service, not an asset. And what is needed is that you cannot have, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 different terminal operators within a port investing in the same infrastructure to be able to serve the same ships. What you need is to make sure that in the port or in the geographical coverage, you have the required infrastructure needed. And by seeing equipment as a service instead of an asset, what you do is that you distribute the investments or the risks associated with these investments on different terminal operators in the same port. Next one is what we call a proper balance of operational equipment. Make sure what goes where. In some cases, a crane, ideally, could be on board the ship, meaning that the ship would be able to call ports without the required cranes because the cranes follow the ship. So you basically extend the number of potential ports this ship can call. In other cases, the crane goes on the terminal, meaning that you're able to serve a larger number of ships because you are not requiring the ship to bring the wrong crane. And the final one is called revenue sharing from the final customer. The name of the game is logistics. What we need is all the different stakeholders in the supply chain or in the transport chain to understand that their final product is logistics. And by having a revenue sharing where your ultimate goal is logistics instead of a series of suboptimal processes, you could be able to make sure that each different stakeholder in the transport chain sees his needs covered. In conclusion, we need to see the autonomous vessel as an ecosystem. We need to see autonomous logistics not as a series of suboptimal nodes, but as a cargo in, cargo out system. And we need to assess and formalize the autonomous vessel ecosystem. That's all. Thank you for your attention. I will be available live to answer any questions you might have after this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation, Dag Atle. The floor is now open for questions. We have one here.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was quite insightful, but I'd also like to comment that it was, out of all the presentations I've seen today, it was also one of the most broad-based and most, probably the presentation which questions the current norm of private commercial transactions, right? Because you're trying to propose an ecosystem where you take out the benefit that each entity takes. So my question is, do you see this realistically happening, and what's the long term that you see it actually reaching fruition or succeeding as an ecosystem? How much time do you give it? Thank you.
What I am sure of is that there are stakeholders out there waiting on whether to make the required investments or not. We need to solve the chicken and the egg challenge, where the ships are waiting for the ports to invest and the ports are waiting for the ships to be ready for services. That's something that needs to be solved. Regarding the change of the new revenue streams, as you call it, we put down, let's say, the 4 main categories of business models that we see. Further investigations are obviously needed.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one for you. Interesting, this servitization concept that you are mentioning for terminal equipment. I have myself worked a bit with servitization of machinery systems on vessels. My question is, do you also see the autonomous vessels themselves as a service, like the terminal equipment?
That's a difficult question for me to answer. I do see, from my personal opinion, obviously, I do see that there are a number of functions in the autonomous vessel ecosystems that are that may be feasible for to be put out as a service from a third-party provider. I mean, the remote control centers is one obvious option. We saw that earlier today. So I'll say yes, I do see some potential.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? In that case, thank you, Dag Atle, and we will move on to the next presentation.
Thank you.